Clearly Indigenous is both a book and an exhibit. The full title is Clearly Indigenous, Native Visions Reimagined in Glass. It's going to open at the Museum of Indian Art and Culture, also called MIAC, in Santa Fe, New Mexico. It'll open the weekend of April 18th, 2021. Will run for 14 months until June 19th of 2022. There are 34 artists in the exhibit and 140 pieces of glass. And fortunately, we're going to be in a very large gallery, so we're able to display the glass beautifully. There has never been an exhibit of this magnitude of Native American glass art in the past. There have been shows that individual artists have done, and there was a group show a number of years ago, but it was a small show and with a limited number of artists. And in fact, when that exhibit was done, there weren't nearly as many natives working in glass as there are now. I was close to the late Lloyd Kivanu, who was one of the founders of the Institute of American Indian Arts, also in Santa Fe. And he told me the story of how Dale Chihuly came to the Institute in 1974 on loan from the Rhode Island School of Design to create a glass hot shop and to teach. And it was a story that I always thought should be told. Native artists have learned the methods and techniques of working with glass from major glass artists like Chihuly and others, but they bring to their art the intellectual content of their own cultures and their artistic traditions. For example, Pueblo artists are known for their works in clay and making clay pots. And several Pueblo artists make glass pots, blow glass pots in this tradition. For instance, Spooner Marcus from Okayawinge, Pueblo, has created some glass pots that were inspired by historic pots that were put together from shards. Really interesting work. He also has done other pots and that include traditional motifs from Pueblo designs. Other Pueblo artists who have made pots have worked with glass blowers in collaboration, and then the Pueblo potters have carved or sandblasted their designs into the pots. Some of the other glass blowers from Pueblos are Tony Hahola, who was actually the first Pueblo artist to work in glass, Ira Lujan, who often makes pots but also does animal fetishes in glass, which he sometimes makes as lids for his pots. So there's a strong tradition of Indian artists using their traditional motifs in their glass art. The same is true for artists from the Northwest Coast who are from basket making traditions. And there are several glass artists who've made stunning baskets in glass, modeled after the Salish baskets of their ancestors. Dan Friday is one who has done both baskets and also has done fish and other animals that are used for sustenance in the Northwest. Whether the artists are making totems or house posts or boxes, as the wood carvers from the Northwest Coast used to make, they've made these in glass and they're stunning. And they continue to use the iconography of their cultures. Preston Singletary is perhaps the best known native glass artist, and he has told the creation story of his Tlingit people, the story of Raven bringing light to the people. And he's also collaborated with a number of other native glass artists, thus expanding the universe of natives working in glass. Other artists have focused on the representation of their ancestors. Joe David, in a collaboration with Preston Singletary, created a bust that's based on ceremonial mask regalia. Lillian Pitt has recreated in glass a pictograph that is important to her people from the Columbia River Gorge area in Washington State. Other artists have worked on bridging the worlds of mainstream society and native society. Joe Feddersen has done works that juxtapose traditional and contemporary native life. And other artists who work in glass have worked with social commentary. Angela Babby, who works with kiln-fired glass-on-glass pieces, has done a great deal of social commentary with her work. And Virgil Ortiz, a well-known Pueblo potter, has created a sci-fi story in glass that looks back to the Pueblo Revolt of 1680 with future aeronauts trying to find artifacts from that period. So we have people working in the most traditional forms to very imaginative forms in their glass art. Carol Lujan is a Navajo artist, and she has created rugs in glass that are based on the weavings that her grandmother used to make. And these glass rugs are created by, she makes a mold with clay, and then she slumps the glass in the mold. Dale Chihuly taught the first native artists who worked in glass. Larry Avicana, who was a graduate of the Institute of American Indian Arts, studied with Chihuly at the Rhode Island School of Design, and he was the first native glass blower. Other artists were also heavily influenced and taught by Chihuly, both at IAIA and at Pilchuck Glass School, which Chihuly founded in the early 70s. Chihuly also was one of the founders of a glass school that was in existence for about 15 years in Taos. And Tony Hahola, who studied with Chihuly, taught at that school. And several of the Pueblo artists were introduced to glass at the Taos school. So Chihuly really brought glass art to Indian country. Serendipitously, he was very influenced by native art. His first major series of cylinders was influenced by Navajo rugs, and he took Navajo weaving designs and adhered the glass strands to cylinders. And those are very famous works of his. He also was influenced by the Salish baskets and their graceful undulating shapes. And so when you look at Chihuly baskets and you see the shapes of the baskets, there's a great deal of Indian influence in his work. The book, also entitled Clearly Indigenous Native Visions Reimagined in Glass, will be available in late November of 2020. It is being published by the Museum of New Mexico Press. I've seen the page proofs, and it's really a stunning book. It'll be 9 by 12, so it's a coffee table sized book. And the quality of the photos of the book, photos in the book, is really outstanding. I'm very excited about it. And the book is a catalog for the exhibit in a way, but the book and the exhibit are organized very differently. The book focuses on the history of glass art coming to Indian country, on the bios and the works of each artist, whereas the exhibit is organized by content or themes. For instance, there's a section called Ancestors' Voices. There's another section called Bridging Two Worlds. There's a section that's all sea creatures, because in the Pacific Northwest, the sea creatures were so important to sustenance, the fish, the orcas, and there's a whole section of sea creatures and another of animals, which of the land and animals of the sky. So the exhibit is content related, whereas the book is focuses more on each artist and their stories. When I was CEO of the Heard Museum in Phoenix, I had thought of doing a glass exhibit, and in fact was planning an exhibit that's similar to what we're doing here, but I retired before I got around to it. And so when I came back home to Santa Fe, I was talking to Della Warrior, who is the executive director of the MIAC Museum, and told her that I had always wanted to do a glass exhibit, and she said she had always wanted to do a glass exhibit. And so we decided that I would curate this glass exhibit for MIAC, and I'm also assisted in that curation by Kathy Short, who is an artist herself, not a glass artist, and she is a co-curator of the exhibit and the photo editor for the book. MIAC has a small collection of glass art and would like to build it further. So anyone who has a collection of native glass art that they want to arrange for what to do with it when they pass on, they should think of giving it to MIAC, because MIAC would really like to create a major collection of glass art. There are a number of plans to do educational programming during the run of the exhibit, but a lot depends on what happens with the COVID pandemic. The various glass artists who are in the show, and there are 34 of them, have agreed to do educational programming when it's possible for us to do it. And I might say that we have 29 American Indian glass artists in the show, 1 Anglo in Chihuly, and 4 Indigenous artists from the Pacific Rim, 2 Australian Aboriginal artists, and 2 Maori artists. And so we have quite a number of artists to draw from for educational programming. The glass artists that are working in the West, Dale Chihuly, Lino Tagliapietra, who's Italian but works in the Pacific Northwest, William Morris, these major glass artists all taught and are teaching glass artists, many native glass artists. So it's a matter of where the glass artists were working and teaching, and the fact that so many tribes are located in the West, whereas Eastern tribes, many were decimated in the early years of colonization. Western tribes have stayed in their areas, and so we do see many more artists, native artists, from the West. The Santa Fe Botanical Garden, which coincidentally is located directly across the street from the Museum of Indian Art and Culture, has an art exhibit, usually sculpture, every year that is up for a year. And an exhibit of glass will open in May of 2021 and close in May of 2022. It will be monumental sculptures of stone and glass. and also some kinetic glass art by an artist named Greg Reich, and also Elodie Holmes, a local Santa Fe artist, is doing some honeycombs in glass and other glass sculpture. So it will be larger pieces, will be outdoors, and will grace the plantings of the garden with colorful glass.